One of the questions I've often wondered about is how a 19-year-old kid from northern Maine found himself nearly 3,000 miles from home, learning to become a flight instructor in Southern California. Family photos and stories suggest that my grandmother may have accompanied him west on American Airlines to help him get settled. I haven't been able to prove that part of the story, but sometimes the unanswered questions become part of the adventure. What I can prove is what happened next. On June 2nd, 1952, Maurice earned his commercial rating at the age of 18. 8 months later, on February 6, 1953, at only 19 years old, Maurice McLean earned his flight instructor certificate at the Martin School of Aviation. 19. When I think back to who I was at 19, I was just earning my private pilot's license. Even then, it's hard to imagine having enough confidence or even enough knowledge to teach someone else how to fly an airplane. Yet that's exactly what my father did. And looking back now as a pilot myself, I appreciate that accomplishment even more. One of the unexpected frustrations of researching my father's life has been his logbooks. As a pilot, he was meticulous. As a historian, well, not so much. He usually recorded his flight time, but rarely the names of the people he taught. Many entries simply read student instruction. Later in life, he sometimes neglected to log flights altogether. For someone trying to reconstruct his aviation story more than 70 years later, that can be maddening. While visiting family in Denver this summer, my cousin Larry filled in another missing piece. He told me that when he stayed with my grandmother during the early 60s, my father had a routine. After finishing his day at the paper mill, he'd hurry home, eat a quick supper, and head straight to the airport. 10 minutes later, they'd hear him flying over the house. I asked Larry something that had been bothering me. "Do you remember which airplane he flew?" And without hesitation, he answered, "The red and white one." That answer meant a great deal to me. The logbooks contain only a handful of entries of that airplane, yet photographs place it at air shows, and Larry remembers hearing it overhead night after night. Sometimes history isn't found in the documents alone. Sometimes it's found in the memories of the people who were there. Although the logbooks don't tell us many names, I do know a little about the people my father instructed. Among them were 2 women earning their single-engine seaplane rating. In the early 50s, that was anything but ordinary. Every student represented someone placed an enormous amount of trust in a 19-year-old instructor. Then my mother shared what has become one of the biggest mysteries in my father's aviation story. Over the last couple of years, I'd heard several versions. Some people believed he'd taught Sam Walton. Others remember it being one of Sam Walton's sons. Naturally, I wanted to know, so I started digging. I searched old logbooks, I contacted Walmart Aviation. They sent me to Walmart Museum, and he put me in touch with the curator of the museum. I followed every lead I could find, and some evidence seemed promising. Other evidence pointed in a different direction. In the end, I couldn't honestly say that the story was proven, but neither could I completely close the door. For now, it remains one of the greatest mysteries surrounding my father's aviation career. Oddly enough, the biggest discovery wasn't a famous name. It was a letter. A former student wrote the airport asking them to endorse his logbook. Before making that request, he took time to thank my father. He wrote, "I had never flown a Cub before or flown from the back seat, but the wonderful instructor taught me very fast and efficiently. I certainly wish I could have had him for an instructor when I first started flying." Those words have stayed with me. Certificates tell us someone was qualified. Logbooks tell us where they flew. But a letter like this tells us something much more important. It tells us the kind of person they were. As Cub2Commander has grown, I've heard story after story from people who knew my father. One woman remembered him as her very first crush when she was 8 years old. She said he would babysit for her parents, not for money, but for one of her mother's lemon meringue pies. Others remembered his kindness. Others remembered his patience. I think that's the underlying theme of Cub2Commander. The airplanes brought people into my father's life. His character is what made them remember him. If someone remembers me the way people remember my father, I think I'd consider that a life well lived. I'm Maurice McLean. Thank you for joining me for another chapter of Cub2Commander. If you've enjoyed these stories of aviation history, family memories, and the remarkable life and flying career of my father, Maurice McLean, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe and like the video. And join me as we continue the journey together. I'll see you in the next episode.